Good morning. Let's do the news roundup. First off, we have some information from TASS about the Ukrainian attacks on the Crimean Bridge. 20 drones were repelled on objects on the whole of Ukraine, the Crimean Peninsula, including the bridge. 14 Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles were destroyed by air defence, and another 6 drones were suppressed by electronic warfare. The similar attack on the peninsula was undertaken on the 30th of July, and it just shows that they are getting better at the electronic air defence, which is really good. There's been protests in Israel against a judicial reform carried out by government led by Benjamin Netanyahu. I struggle when it comes to Israeli protests because I don't understand why they're not protesting the actual hell that they're creating next door. But, you know, they are protesting for their rights, I suppose. Zambia has agreed to boost cooperation on mineral extraction to Japan. Again, I'm not sure that I trust this. I think that they should be getting involved and working with partners who want them to work their own products rather than exporting raw materials. Cameroonian journalist has sued the White House spokesperson over freedom of press violation. In court filing, he states that the US Secret Service terminated on the 31st of July his pass to access the White House campus without any reason or explanation. The press does not just include a small class of elite journalists credentialed by one another. The First Amendment guarantees protect the public's right to engage in constitutionally protected press activity. The journalist says he believes this decision is due to the fact he repeatedly asked Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, uncomfortable questions, and also tried to shout out his questions when she refused his right to ask them. Yeah, I think that this sets a very worrying precedent if the State Department can simply cancel journalists who they feel are asking questions that they don't like. We already have a White House that does not allow any questions to be asked of Mr. Biden because he's not well enough to answer them. So to have a press secretary that can't even handle a bit of heat, it's bad. It's really bad. Ecuadorian parliamentary candidate has been reportedly shot. So this is the second shooting. The first was obviously successful. And it is most certainly not the time to be a presidential candidate in Ecuador. It sounds rough. Sputnik have put together a kind of grouping of the history of ECOWAS military interventions. Liberia, 3,000 military personnel to restore peace and stability between 1989 and 1996. Sierra Leone in 1998 to restore the elected president to power, provided support to UN peacekeeping missions to monitor the implementation of the ceasefire agreement between the government and the rebels. Guinea-Bissau brokered a peace deal that called for national unity, government, new elections, and the withdrawal of foreign troops. Cote d'Ivoire, I don't know if I'm saying these right, mediated several peace talks and deployed a force of about 1,500 troops to support a French-led operation that aimed to enforce a ceasefire and protect civilians. Mali, from 2012 to the present, headed the African-led international support mission to support the Malian government in the fight against the rebels, support the Malian government in restoring its sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as facilitating humanitarian assistance and human rights protections. And the Gambia entered the Gambia to guarantee the legitimacy of the newly elected president As the Echo MiG troops approached the capital, the former leader agreed to relinquish power and go into exile. Now, none of these places seem to be particularly pleasant ones. They seem to be places that have had a long history of breaches of human rights, of theft, of intense terrorist activity. And I think that says quite a lot about who Echo is actually working for. Yesterday was World Elephant Day. I love elephants. I think they're absolutely fantastic. I struggle to hear some of the terrible things that happen to them around the world, but they really are the most gorgeous and regal of creatures. I hope they had a lovely day. Egypt is refraining from sending weapons to Ukraine despite US calls. I think there's been a lot of this. I think that the US is desperate for this to jump into a world war footing, because to the US world war means money, and I think that they are quite desperate for other countries to get involved, and more importantly, for other countries to be seen as dangerous to Russia, to unfriendly to Russia. And they'll do this by coercing countries. They've done the same thing with South Korea, into actually making these deals and sending these weapons, and then actually posting videos or showing evidence that Egyptian weapons have been used. And what this basically does is create an idea that Russia has less friends than it does, that there are more countries on the side of the US than there perhaps is. Nigerian human rights activists have urged to restore electricity in Niger and limit the sanctions. We have to remember is that there was very limited electricity in Niger anyway, so this electricity will have been going to hospitals and for real necessary reasons, and of course they've shut it off. I think we're increasingly seeing the lack of will from people in Nigeria to get involved in a war with Niger. The party of slain Ecuadorian presidential candidate have announced a new nominee. I hope they protect that person very, very well, because it looks like it's pretty rough in Ecuador at the moment. This is an article about regret of transgender surgery. One male who identifies as transgender has been permitted to be euthanized for profound regret over the surgery, and there is another male that wishes to go down the same path in Canada. I think that we will look back with great horror about some of the things that are happening surgically in the world at the moment. To bury its dead, Ukraine is having to dig up victims of past war. This is according to The Economist. This was something that I reported on a few months ago, much to the cries of conspiracy theorists, but we know that this has been happening for a while, and now The Economist has done a piece on it. And finally, Ukraine plans to cancel visa-free regime with Israel and request its exclusion from Ramstein. Sources told the Kiev Post they believe there is a real danger that information discussed with Israel at the Ramstein meetings will probably fall into the possession of the aggressor state. Now, I don't know what has gone down between Israel and Ukraine. They seem birds of a feather from what I can see. But here we are. So there seems to be some arguments perhaps about what's been going on or things that are happening. And now they're pushing back against Israel. Pushing back against Israel really means pushing back against America, because Israel and America are the same thing. So I wonder how this will look to the Jewish lawmakers who decide to send things like billions of dollars into Ukraine, etc., etc. I believe as well that it was because of Israeli pleas that Zelensky was still allowed to live. Anyway, that's me for the morning. Have a lovely Sunday and God bless. Good morning.